Hello and welcome back, and this is the Beelink ME Pro, a NAS that we've reviewed on the channel as well as featuring a bunch of other videos, rocking out with an N150 processor and RAM and 2 bays of storage there in its compact modular chassis with removable motherboard. This video isn't about this. This video is about this, a NAS that I've been playing with now for about 36 hours. This is the new model, rocking out with an Intel Wildcat CPU, the Intel Core 3 processor 304. Now that CPU is a huge scale up over the N150. It's also a processor we're going to start to see with different NAS brands in the coming 12 to 18 months. Now I say that because the Intel 304 that's inside this was launched in Q2 2026. I have never seen a NAS rock out with a processor that is less than a quarter old in terms of its availability. Rocking out with 5 cores, 5 threads, with a base clock at 1.4 gigahertz up to 4.3 gigahertz. 5 core, 5 thread as mentioned, with a TDP rating as low as 10 watts up to 35 watts, and integrated graphics up to 2.3 gigahertz there. Also with an AI processing rating, or tera operations per second, of 15 TOPS. So again, nice stats there. It's also a Gen 4 architecture processor. The system arrives with 10 gig networking on the rear, a 2.5 gig networking port there, HDMI 4K 60 frames, and also 2 USB 4 ports there on the rear, alongside 10 gig USB and arriving with Wi-Fi 6 connectivity on a base card, and it has 2 hard drive bays there, much like the predecessor, and a cooling fan located in the base, along with a modular access point that allows you to access M.2 as well as the SODIMM RAM. This system arrives with 16 gig of DDR5 RAM. So I know you're thinking, up to this point, yum yum in my tum. And that's what I was thinking pretty much all the time until when I was finding out one of these was getting sent to me by Beelink. They supplied it, they're not paying for the video, they're hearing this the same time you are. However, I wanted to make this video before I completely finished the review because I need to talk about the price. Right now, this system is listed at $619. Now, it's listed on Beelink's own website with a price discount there, but I know there's going to be some of you, after following the likes of the ME Mini and looking at the ME Pro, that were knocking around for about $200 to $260 and going, what? Because that's a big old scale up at $619. Now, I'm not here to justify the product for Beelink. That is their job. This video is about my first impressions after 24 to 48 hours with this device. I think it's bordering on about 40 hours right now of utility. And what you're actually getting for that price tag. The full review will come later on, but I wanted to talk about it now because it's going to ruffle feathers. Now, the first thing, that's 16 gig of RAM. I'm pleased to say, it ain't fixed, it ain't no LP RAM. It arrives via a SODIMM slot located inside. So again, it's 16 gig of traditional standard RAM. Lovely stuff. It's not ECC, this is not an ECC supported CPU, and we will talk more about that processor later, because there is definitely the idea that that processor there has definitely impacted the price, given it is so new. However, we're going to talk about storage, because this is a 2-bay device. It's got the 2 SATA storage bays in there, but it has 1 M.2 slot. It doesn't have 2, it has 1. It's a Gen 4 times 1 speed slot. I've already got an M.2 inside there. However, the system also arrives with, in its base model, 512 gigabytes of storage. Now, this isn't being delivered via an M.2. It's not a compact M.2 inside, and at that scale, it's not an eMMC. It's actually a UFS 3.1 drive. Now, that storage module is located underneath the cooling fan inside. Now that definitely impacts the price. That definitely is one of the reasons this device is commanding that price tag there, because that storage drive inside there, because it's not M.2, you're forced to pay for it. And I know that's going to have mixed feelings in the room. Now I will say, in my provisional testing, that drive performed well. Because it's not an eMMC that can generally hit around 250 to 120 megabytes per second read over write, the UFS drive inside there has the capability to hit 2,100 megabytes per second read over 1,200 megabytes per second write. However, inside, I could only manage to get it to hit 1.4 to 1.6 gigabytes per second read and 1.3 to 1.4 megabytes per second write. Likely because it's on a Gen 4 times 1 lane there. So 20 gigabit and generally an SSD there when it comes to read and write, you'll hit those sort of numbers. And again, when I bench tested the M.2 in the base, I saw pretty much identical numbers as well. So it's clearly on 4 times 1. That drive inside, let's talk about the pros. One, we're definitely paying less than you would expect for an M.2 of that scale in this system if you were to buy it separately. Two, when you do buy this device, it arrives with a licensed copy of Windows inside. I won't lie, I scrubbed that immediately for NAS use. But those are all good things, and it's integrated inside, keeping it more cost efficient. But at the same time, the ability to not have it on an M.2 means removal becomes tricky, and also choice about the scale of that drive, because you might have a couple of M.2s knocking around. So yes, as a package, I still think that value and price point makes sense, but there is no denying that that is going to ruffle feathers the way they have approached that drive inside there. And at the very least, it's not an eMMC or a little block of 64 gig on the side there. They clearly made a conscious decision there with the M.2. Now, returning to that CPU, we've also got to talk about the lane distribution. Remember I mentioned that the Intel 3304 is a Gen 4 architecture processor? It is Gen 4, but there is 6 lanes. We thought the N150 in this, with its 9 lanes, felt a bit tight, but this has got a 6-lane PCIe architecture. Now, in its defense, 6 lanes of Gen 4 is going to give you practically, in terms of bandwidth, double that of Gen 3. This would have to be 12 lanes of Gen 3 to give the same bandwidth, but we're still allocating them to things. There is ways and means to separate them and share things, but it's going to be a little complicated. I will say, during my even initial testing, it's been by no means deep cut. The network testing, great. I was getting 10 gig out the 10 gig. The M.2, as I say, I got the expected 20 gigs performance there. The USB 4 ports there on the rear didn't seem to work within FIGO OS, but when I put Zimmer on this, it was able to let me see the USB 4 ports. So definitely driver dependent on the operating system of choice. Not a big surprise there. And storage performance and everything inside with regard to the controllers are all pretty darn standard for me. The Wi-Fi 6 is delivered via an MT7 920 controller on board, again, located in the front, underneath that front panel there. The 10 gig networking controller there was a Realtek, that is the Realtek 8127. We've had dalliances with that controller, it does the job. Ultimately, this is arguably the most powerful 2-bay NAS I've ever had here on the channel. Now, I say that with less than a month ago saying that one of the most powerful 2-bays I've ever seen was the 2-bay from Ugreen, the DXP 2800 GT there. So again, that arriving around 350 to 450, depending on where you are in the world, your tax, your currency and more, puts that at a lower price than this. But this brings out a far more capable CPU for those that pursue Intel, and it is Gen 4 architecture rather than Gen 3. And also this has that USB 4 connectivity there, which again, depending on your NAS operating system, is going to allow for direct connectivity, but otherwise will also allow for things like adding additional fast storage, or depending on drivers and support, adding more 10 gig network connections onto a device with no PCIe slots there. I will also say, very early reporting on thermals was surprisingly good, as hopefully you can see from the footage on screen. Yesterday afternoon, when I was testing this device alongside continuing my reviewing of a GLI Net router, Minis 4 and workstation, and a KVM update, software update I was working on, you can see the thermals of this NAS versus those other devices that I'm working with here in the same room, in the same climate. Bit hot here in the UK right now, and I was really pleased. 35 degrees to 36 around the edges, 39 to 41 on the front, and around 48 degrees there on the rear with the ports. So initial testing of this has been very positive, and the performance of that chassis that we already gave great praise for in the case of the N150 model really holds up. But I do think this is going to be a model that will divide the room a little bit because of, as mentioned, the inclusion of that storage and RAM, pushing that price up to a slightly more aggressive price point for a 2-bay NAS, and also the way they have approached that storage with the prefix 520 and only one M.2, I know will push this into a slightly more niche field. I don't think it makes it unpopular. I think there is definitely a demand for this, but it isn't as an uncomplicated proposition as we saw in the ME Pro N150 model. There is a lot in here, and you break it down for the price point, and we'll talk about this more in the review. I think $619 for this amount of hardware in the current climate, massive italics, is desirable. But it's not going to be desirable to everyone, and I think it is good value for what you're getting as a package. But until we've done the full review and worked out its quirks and eccentricities, I'm going to hold off my full thoughts on that. But let me know what you guys think. It is available to pre-order and buy right now. There's a link in the description. Using that link will result in a small commission coming here to NAS Compares. It allows me and Eddie, just us at NAS Compares, to keep doing what we do, the reviews, the guides, the support, the works. So if you are interested, please use that link in order to get a hold of one for yourself. But thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the full review.